Hey people, it's Dale Gamer playing World of Warcraft Classic, and this is an in-depth discussion going over some of the player base, some of the game's mechanics, and just going over some misinformation that players have as a whole. Now, I want to be clear that this is not a complaint video, even though people will label it as such. It's basically more an informative piece to explain the differences that people don't have a clear understanding on, because the majority of players that came into this are coming from retail just to come in here and annoy players that are playing Classic who wanted the game as it is, which is a whole different story in itself, what people are calling Classic, and then Vanilla, Classic, things like that. So I'll be going over the differences of that, making people who haven't played this game aware of just how bad the player base is, because yeah, in MMOs the player base is bad. However, in this game, it's particularly bad due to a couple situations, and then on top of that, Blizzard allows something to go on that completely defeats the entire purpose of the socialization in the game. So, that being said, let me get right into it, and again, clarify before going into anything that this isn't a complaint video. Like I said, people label it as such. It's an informative piece to let people know the correct things that are being I'm sorry, not the correct things, but the proper terminologies, the difference between vanilla and classic, because classic is not vanilla, and this version of the game, which is totally not classic at all. I shouldn't say that. It's not quite accurate. And so I'll explain what I mean by that. Okay, so first things first, let me get the player base out of the way, because that's a major problem, because the player base coincides with one of the other issues that are going on that Blizzard allows to happen that contradicts the entire socialization of the game. So, first thing, this is kind of like a mess, because there were so many intricate problems involved with this, and they are problems that it's ridiculous and hard to follow. So I'll try to break this down as simple as I can. Okay, so first things first. The player base. There are a majority of people who played the game back when the game was first released. I'm one of those people because I played at the beginning. I think I played the game, I'm pretty sure that I say about a month after Burning Crusade was released, because that was about it. So even though I didn't quite play the original WoW, I was close enough to it where I understood the game mechanics and how the game was actually played. Yeah, it wasn't exactly the same, but it was close enough to it. So let me go into some details here about the difference between when people say, "Oh, this had it in vanilla." The terminology vanilla, and Blizzard even used this, and they're wrong on this. And so I know this sounds weird, but let me explain. The term vanilla, and when you're referring to World of Warcraft, literally means no expansions. That does not mean the game is not set up with the coding to accept the expansions. It just you don't have them. So when you buy a version of World of Warcraft, depending on what expansion you buy, it's irrelevant the expansion, because you're not buying the expansion. When you buy any part of this game, you get the entire game all at once. All of the expansions are in the game, which means they're coded for the game. So if you only buy Burning Crusade, that does not change the fact that the Burning Crusade code is not the original code. It is now Battle for Azeroth code, because all of the stuff that's in Battle for Azeroth can be done in Burning Crusade. And instead of giving you the expansions piece by piece, they now just give you the entire game and then lock the expansion behind an area you can't get to. So if you try to take a ship, so basically even if you were to have the original WoW, the original WoW does not have ships that go out of Stormwind. But in the version that you download now, there are ships that go out of Stormwind, which means it's not the original game. What you're playing is a vanilla version of the game without the expansions added into it that you can get to, even though the expansions are added into the game code. Once you add the expansions into the game code itself, the original game is out the window, because all of the mechanics that you can use inside Battle for Azeroth, Legion, Warlords of Draenor, are actually inside the original code. That's why you can fly. That's why you can do all this stuff. So just because you don't have the expansions does not mean you're not using the coding from the current expansions. It has to allow it, because that's what you play, in case you want to buy it. Buying it just unlocks the area you can go to. So if you don't have Battle for Azeroth, but you download, up to Legion, you try to go down to the docks at Stormwind, you can still see the ship leave to go to Battle for Azeroth. If you get on the ship, it'll put you back on the dock and say you don't have access to the content. So vanilla is not classic. Classic does not even allow flying in it. Vanilla does. That is the difference when people say, this is back in vanilla. They have no idea what they're talking about because they don't understand how the game is pieced together. Before they gave you the entire game, every expansion was given separately. So you would have to buy the actual expansion itself to install the land or the area or the zone that the game is in. So, for example, before, if you wanted Wrath of the Lich King, Wrath of the Lich King's codes wasn't in the original, so you didn't have cold flying. So you couldn't, there was nothing you could do about it. So, but now that you do, you can actually, now that you buy the game, Wrath of the Lich King's area is put into it. So you can't get to it, but you still have all the coding that can be used in Wrath of the Lich King inside the original game. So again, people that try to claim that vanilla and classic are the same thing have no idea what they're talking about. Vanilla simply means the base game without the expansions, but it has all of the code to allow the expansions, and that's why you can fly in the original now. So that being said, this brings me to the player base. Okay, so retail people are actually, the players that are on retail and the players that play on private servers, try coming into Classic and having Classic be a replication of retail or their private servers, and they will actually create arguments about it, which is partly why I have global chat shut off. I refuse to go into global chat, which is partly what I'm getting at. The reason I have global chat shut off is because I play this game solo. And that's partly, the player base's attitude. You're playing it wrong. All right. The problem with these people is that they're being hypocrites. So when you're coming into the game, again, I'm not complaining, I'm just making you aware of this is the idiots that you're dealing with. So they will come into the game, they will go into zones that they are under-leveled for. So for example, on the Eastern Kingdom, if you're a human, I'm going to use my character class as an example. Okay, when you're human, you start off, where is it? Up in Northshire. Now, then you go to Goldshire or whatever. You can go wherever you want. You can literally walk wherever you want. You'll probably get killed if you do it, but you can walk anywhere you want. It's unlocked. You can go everywhere you want. And that's partly what people try to do. I can be here. All right, so I'll get to what I mean by that in a minute. So then when you're a human, you start here, and there are more than enough quests to go from when you're in Northshire to Goldshire to Stormwind to Westfall. Between those three areas, you can hit at least level 21. There's enough questing and there's enough experience points to hit level 21. Now, certain monsters in the areas are higher level. So when you first go into Westfall here, the enemies that you enter, because you enter in from up here and then you can go this way. So what happens is the enemies up here are level 15. When normally people come in from Elwynn Forest, they're about level 10 or 11. Which means these enemies that are level 15 are way above their level. They will have a serious problem killing them. As you get into this zone, the enemies become your own level. So there's like level 10s, level 9s, and things like that. But that's not the issue. These idiots actually believe that the enemy level determines the quest level. So they don't understand the colorization because the colorization is totally different from how it is in retail. And they're applying retail mentality and mechanics to Classic, and it doesn't work that way. Because again, remember, I was playing it a month after Burning Crusade came into play. And I was close enough to, playing original WoW that I know what I'm talking about. So what happens is people that only came in the current expansions have no idea what they're talking about, and they think that retail is how the game is. Because when people come in, they're like, where did they move the auction house to? Which is a rather amusing comment because they didn't move the auction house. The auction house is where it always has been. To them, it's been moved because they're coming in from an expansion where it has been moved. But when they come in, it's like, where'd the auction house get moved? The auction house didn't get moved. They just it was never where they originally put it in retail. So what happens now is that you have these players going into levels they're way under leveled for, and they're using grouping to get somebody who's 5 levels higher than them to carry them through. Now, this leads into when somebody points out, I have actually seen arguments in the chat, and this is why I shut global chat off. I'm not even going to be subjected to any of this. I can play the game solo, even though it might take me a while. I don't care. That leads into people saying, play how you want, and then telling you you shouldn't be playing solo. They will literally argue with people stating, play how they want, when you point out that they're being carried in areas that they're way under leveled for, but then they'll turn around and tell you you shouldn't be playing solo or how to spec your character, which is completely ridiculous considering they're being hypocrites. And of course, you're never going to say anything to them about it because they're going to argue with you. So that brings into the point on being underleveled in Classic is not the same thing as being underleveled in BF and the current expansions. So, for example, if I'm level 32 right now, there are enemies in this zone I cannot even attack. Well, I can attack them, but they're level 37, 38. I can't even damage them. I mean, I could damage them, but I'll probably get killed in doing it. It'll take me forever to kill one guy. Now, that's not to say I can't get together somebody, level 31, 32, and 33, and we can all attack them. We may have a problem, but the enemy will get killed. So we're grouping up, and we're attempting to do that. But the fact remains is I'm under-leveled for those characters. And if I can't damage the character solo, I'm not going to be able to do anything to the enemy while I'm in a group. The enemy's level and things don't change just because you're in a group. So, for example, this enemy is level 36. It's 4 levels above me. I can kill it, but I'll take a lot of damage in the process. It's not that I can't kill it. I'm going to have a serious problem. If it was level 37 and above, I'd be screwed. And so, because the enemies, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about is the mechanics on the difference between the way the game is programmed and making sense, and then some of the shit that Blizzard did to this game is screwed up. All right, so anyway, back to the player base. What they will do is they will utilize the grouping aspect and say, there's nothing. And when somebody points out, you're under-leveled for this area. So let me explain. They'll argue with them. So here, this, let me see, a good example of this. As I was stating, between when you start as a human, and this concept applies to the entire game throughout. So when you start as a human, you start in Northshire. Then you go to Goldshire. There is more than enough quest and XP between Northshire, Stormwind, Goldshire, East Loggingvale, and Westfall to reach level 21. Now, Westfall is an area that is between the levels of, I think it's 10 to 18 or something like that. It's high. Now, you would normally do that, and then you would go to Red Ridge Mountains. Now, Red Ridge Mountains is an area that is a level area. It doesn't have it on this map, but it has it on retail. Like if you hover your mouse over it, it'll say, the recommended level to be in that area. Now, it's not that you can't walk into this area. Like I can be level 1 and I can absolutely walk over here. I'll probably get killed, but I can walk over here. There's nothing stopping me. So yeah, I can go where I want, but this area is a level 20, it's a level 19 to a level 25 or 26 area, because there's enemies in here that are level 27, level 28. At level 15, you cannot touch anything in this area. The enemies coming in here, when you're first coming in here, they're level 18, 19. If you're level 14 to 16, you're going to get killed walking through here, unless you have somebody carrying you through, or you just get lucky and avoid it. Now, that's not to say that you can't come in here. Now, the problem is, if a level 14 comes into this area, there's a couple of quests that bring you in here. The problem with this is they think that this is their area. So you can't argue with them. You can't tell them that you're under level for this area. They're like, well, I can be here. And using that, they can walk over there as a means to be there. Now, they can be there all that they want. That's on them. That's no big deal. The problem is that they're arguing with people. And if there are people questing here at level 14 to 16. This area is not for a level 14 to 16, even though there's enemies in here that are level some levels there, there's a quest or two you could turn in. They actually stay in here and try to level, which means they have skipped Westfall completely. Because if they're leaving Elwyn Forest at level 10 or 15 or whatever it is, and then going over to Red Ridge, and I'm sorry, yeah, the Red Ridge Mountains here, which means they're skipping leveling. Now, why is that an issue? It's not an issue. They can do whatever that they want. But the fact remains is they're being carried and not actually playing the game. You can say that this is playing, but that's not the context of what playing in this when you're dealing with Classic means. It's the same thing as grouping. They try to use grouping. I'm grouped. What? I'm getting help. If you can't damage the enemy by yourself, you're not going to be contributing to a group, which means you're not helping. So they're using the grouping thing as a ruse to say, hey, I'm grouping. That's what grouping means, because they're idiots and want to argue. So these are the types of mentality. You're running into this mentality. They don't understand what the context of help means. They don't understand what the context of grouping is. They're using a generic term. But when it comes to them doing stuff, they say, oh, let them play how they want. Except when you apply that to them being underleveled, people will tell you, well, let them play how they want, not realizing that comment is stupid because they're not actually playing if they can't damage anything. I'm playing, I'm walking over here, I'm grouping, there's nothing wrong with it. So you're saying that we shouldn't be grouping? And that's not what grouping means. Grouping in the context of Classic, when you're dealing with this particular MMO, grouping literally means getting 4 or 5 people together at your own level in a zone that you are not underleveled for, and actually contributing to actually fighting for, finishing the quests and things like that. That's what grouping means. If they're grouped up if they're joining people in a group that's carrying them, they're not grouped. That's not what the definition is. You can argue that, yeah, they're grouped. Well, obviously they're together in a group. That's not what the context means. They're removing the context to try to justify themselves to being idiots. So basically what this whole context comes down to is you can't talk to anybody in this game. That's why I have global chat shut off. What's going on here is what they're doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can play however you could, it's your game, do what you want. But when you're cheaping the system to get around playing it, because that's what retail does. That's the retail mentality. That's what happens. It's not Classic. So when you're dealing with people that are doing this, the retail mentality and the private server mentality, this is exactly what you're dealing with. These are the same types of people who will use an entire walkthrough to finish a game and then argue they actually played it. You can say, and then say, well, I played it, I moved my character around. That's not what we're talking about, and everybody knows that. So they're splitting hairs being stupid with these concepts then in the context of stuff that doesn't even make any sense. All right, so that's basically the mentality of the player base, which now presents a problem that Blizzard has allowed to go on. And that problem is RCR. The letters R, C, and R, which stands for right-click report. Now, the problem with right-click report is that people are abusing it because Blizzard has an automated system where it basically takes 5 or 6 people to report somebody for anything. It doesn't even matter. You could not even be saying anything. I could be sitting here and people could be reporting me right now. And since the system is automated, it automatically removes the person from being able to chat globally or whatever the case may be. That poses a problem because in this particular game environment, it's required for you to be social. You need to be able to talk to people. And when people get the lynch mob mentality to do this, the automated system overrides it. They get the person, they screw the person over, and then they will get away with it. So there's no ramifications for them actually using this, which is a serious friggin' problem. Which means there's no reason to have global chat inside the game anyway, if Blizzard's going to allow this. Because again, I've covered this in many of my videos that online harassment cannot be determined by a video game company. That's already defined by the U.S. Supreme Court and the Department of Justice, at least as far as the United States goes. When you're in an MMO and you're in the United States laws apply to whomever is in your game. And it doesn't really matter, which means the company is being held accountable for allowing these people to do it. So what happens here is you have people, games under law are classified as social media. Social media has very stringent laws. You're not allowed to bully and everything else. It's not that can't do it, because people have this idea in their head that, well, if it wasn't allowed, they wouldn't be able to do it. That's completely false. And then it's like, well, you can't determine whether I'm being hateful. No, you can't. The U.S. Supreme Court and the Department of Justice have already determined this. So how do you prove this? Well, if people are lynch mobbing you, every zone you go to, they're online stalking you. That's what this means, because this is literally the equivalency of following somebody around Facebook. It doesn't matter whether you're online. It doesn't matter where you are. You're literally following them through cyberspace. It's actually against the law. Now, that doesn't really matter unless you go take it to court. But the problem here is that these people are not having any consequences to it. And if you stick up for yourself, tell the video game company, whoever it is that, hey, this is against the law. You're not supposed to be doing this. If you keep doing this, I'm going to, press charges against the people who are doing this, take them to court. You'll get your account banned. It's like you can't win. And so what happens here is if you get your account banned, you really should take action. Go to court, because they can't hide behind the terms of service, because this isn't even a terms of service issue if they're following you around the game. It's one thing for people to say stuff. Don't get me wrong. You can place people on ignore. But the fact remains, these people are in the chats following you around, lynch mobbing you, and getting everybody else to rally against you, which is cyber stalking and online harassment. It's literally a felony because it crosses state lines. That's what felony means. In that case, it's a federal offense under that context. So the game company can't even use the terms of service to even get around this. They have felony felony harassment being done in their game, which means they're held accountable, especially when they know what's going on if you've been reporting it. So there's no way that they don't know. So for them to continue allowing this under that context and then punish you when you finally had enough and say, hey, I'm going to take you to court, they silence you. And then when you had enough of it because you shouldn't have been silenced because of the lynch mob, because they're letting it go on, you tell, okay, I'm done. I'm done. If you keep this up, I want this removed. There's no reason for it. This. Go back and look at the chat history. And if you're going to take action against my account for this, I'm going to take you to court. They will get rid of you for doing that. So you get screwed, and then you get screwed for sticking up for yourself. And that's just ridiculous to even allow this to go on, because it undermines the entire foundation of what Classic is, because Blizzard has allowed these idiots to come in here. And that's what they're doing. They've wrecked the retail and private servers have literally wrecked the game. They know the automated system is in there. They know this isn't like this. They know Classic is not like retail, and then they're coming in and doing it to use to start arguments. And that's why I don't even want to read. I don't even bother going into global chat. I have it shut. I literally have it shut off. So I just leave the channels. I don't even want to see what anybody's saying. Like I said, I could get silenced for making this video. That's not even in the game, and then the automated system will come over for it. So it's a friggin' problem. So I just don't even want to deal with it. So I just don't even bother. That's why I've learned to play solo, and I'm enjoying it. I don't care if I take this. I don't care if it takes me forever. It's fine. I'm enjoying it. I'm getting my money's worth. So that's the mentality of the people and the problems that Blizzard has in this game. Now I'm going to bring up a couple of mechanics in this game and explain the difference between something that's broken and shouldn't be the way it is, and then something that makes sense, that makes the game a little challenging. So let me start with challenging, and then I'll get into what's broken. Okay, now, all casters in this game have a serious problem with enemies resisting their spells. Okay, they resist it consistently. A miss and a resist and a dodge are not the same thing. They're three separate things in this game. When an enemy is resisting something, it's resisting some type of effect that you do. When you miss, when you miss, it's because you swung and then you didn't hit it. If the enemy dodges, it's because the enemy actually dodged the hit that would have connected. So they're three separate things. Now, the issue with resistance is, obviously, if an enemy is higher than my level, that makes perfect sense. It's a lot harder to hit because the enemy's above your level. One of the problems that people have with this is that when an enemy is, even if they are your level, when an enemy gets down below a certain amount of health, it's almost as if its resistance is in dodge and miss ratio get jacked up, which would kind of make more sense because the more you attack an enemy, the more aggressive it becomes or the more defensive it becomes. So in that regard, if you are neck and neck with an enemy for health and then the enemy you throw a spell at it, even if it's your own level, resist it, that makes sense. That makes the game challenging because as the enemy's health goes lower, it has a tendency to build a better immunity. Doesn't mean it should. It doesn't mean you're not going to be able to hit it. It just makes sense to be able to do that because that's the ratio. Now, what doesn't make any sense is some of the mechanics that the enemies are doing in the game, such as the chase and aggro radius. What I mean by chase is if I hit this enemy with a spell and I run away and I've done significant damage to it, there comes a point in time where an enemy needs to stop chasing you and then return to its original point. All MMOs have this. However, in this game, it is actually broken. Now, in an instance or a dungeon, it can follow you throughout the entire dungeon because the dungeon itself, or the instant itself, or the raid, is the entire aggro, the entire dungeon or whatever it is, the interior, is the aggro radius. It can follow you everywhere in there. It has no limitation. But when you are not in an instance, it has a limitation. However, that limitation is broken in this. I have had enemies outside a dungeon chase me from like here all the way here. Like literally, I was here. The enemy chased me all the way over here. That's not even supposed to be happening. That's broken if an enemy is chasing you that far. Another thing is that that's broken is the aggro radius. Okay, you could be standing there, and I'll hit this. Nothing can happen with this enemy. I can pull this enemy by itself, and this enemy won't even ignore it. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, this enemy will move here and then just somehow attract this enemy, despite the enemy should have been attracted when I hit it in the first place. That's broken. Now, a mechanic that people are getting aggravated with, that this is called challenging, and it makes sense. This is not broken. This is just how the game is programmed for this particular example. If I'm fighting this enemy, and somebody else comes up. Now, this is a spider, okay? If I'm fighting this enemy, and another player comes up and attacks this enemy, and this enemy chases the player off, this enemy's position is right here next to this one. So it's in this category. It's the same enemy type. What happens is if I'm fighting this one, and this one's on its way back after leaving the other player, it will now attack me. Even though I didn't touch it, even though I'm here, and I'm attacking it here, and that enemy runs off, even though it's over there, if this enemy runs within this range, it'll attack me because I'm attacking that. That's smart programming. That's nothing wrong with that. That makes sense. These enemies are grouped together. They're going to attack you, and that falls for pretty much anything. So what players are doing as a tactic is they're seeing you attack something, they're aggroing a bunch of the same enemy type, and then running away, and then on the way back, the enemies start attacking you as if you did it because you're attacking that one enemy. So players are using it to get players killed. It's a cheesy tactic, but hey, what can you do, If you're on a server that doesn't have PvP enabled at first, then that's how you would get them. Which brings me to another issue of idiots that don't understand that every single server is PvP. It is outstandingly asinine and amazing at the same time, the utter fucking stupidity level of players that literally try to argue, well, you have to toggle PvP on, to not understand that the server itself is still PvP. Whether or not you have to turn on PvP does not exempt the fact that it's built into the server. If you can do PvP on the server, turning it on is irrelevant. The fact that you're doing PvP is the only point that matters. And if PvP can be done on the server itself, guess what? The server itself is a PvP. People are like, well, it has to be turned on. What does that have to do with this server is still PvP? Can you do PvP on it? Yes. Well, you have to turn it on. I didn't ask if you could turn it on. Is PvP possible to be done on the server? Yes. Therefore, it's a PvP server. There is no such thing in this game as a non-PvP server. Every server in this entire game is PvP, simply because being able to turn it on proves it's PvP. Just because it's not on does not mean PvP is not in the server. It's just not currently activated. If PvP was not even in the server, you wouldn't be able to turn it on. In other words, it wouldn't even exist. You wouldn't be able to do it. It would be impossible for anybody to even ask to turn it on. So a non-PvP server would never have any PvP of any nature of it in any way, shape, or form inside the server. Period. The word PvP wouldn't even be, it would be blocked out. You wouldn't even be able to say it. So a true non-PvP server would have to have no PvP involved in it at all whatsoever. Not turning it on. Turning it on means PvP is still involved. If it's off, PvP is still involved. It just has to be turned on. So that's the difference on that. Now, there's one other broken mechanic I want to explain in here. Now, there's a difference between having an enemy or a drop rate for something happen and then having this happen. I'm going to talk about fishing. All right, so I'm here in the Arathi Highlands, and I'm at this pool. I'm literally right next to Witherbark Village. And so this particular pool, my fishing skill is at 134. Now, it's one thing if you're farming an item and the enemy doesn't drop it. Okay, that's fine. The game does that for you. You know, it forces you to play, level, get more experience points. It's annoying, don't get me wrong, because if you kill 40 enemies looking for a bandana and that enemy is supposed to drop one, that's annoying. That doesn't mean it's broken. It just means the game is purposely programmed to do this. However, that is not the same thing as about what I'm about to explain. The rates on certain things in this game are 100% broken. So let me explain. Okay. Fishing. Okay, I have fishing at 130. I have fishing at 134. Okay? Now, my fishing before was 133 at this pool. The problem with this is I cast my line over 200 times in this pool, and my fish got away every single time. It was finally I got it after 200 and something times. There's a difference between an enemy not dropping an item and then having this happen. To cast your line in a place you can fish with a fishing skill that high over 200 times and never catch something shows something's wrong with the game mechanics. An enemy not dropping an item after 40 times, okay, that's just the drop rate. But to completely never catch anything in over 200 times in an area you can fish in with your fishing skill that high is idiotically broken. Period. That brings me to the final closing thing on some quests. All right, now, granted there is a way certain quests are programmed, fine. That doesn't change the fact that whoever programmed some of the quests in this game are basically fucking idiots, because when you're dealing with side quests, that's one thing. But when you're dealing with class-specific quests and main quest, and the situation is set up so only certain criteria can fulfill that quest, and I'll explain what I'm talking about in a minute, so that basically means unless that criteria is met, a player that's doing a class-specific quest for their character cannot get it done. Which is ridiculous, because if a bunch of people weren't playing this game, what has to be done for certain classes in this game as far as a specific quest, you would never be able to get the quest done, ever. And so that's why I'm bringing this up, as far as the game designers should have actually made a way to finish every quest regardless if you can do that or not. I understand why they didn't, but when it comes to a class-specific quest, that's a different story. So let me explain what I'm talking about. I'm a warlock, and so this particular quest here, at the very beginning of it, and I'm not saying do this for every part, I'm saying for the specific situation being set up, there is something called components for the enchanted gold blood robe. In the very beginning of it, it tells you need something called robes of arcana. Now, that robe isn't explained from the quest giver how to make it. The quest giver says you can buy one from somebody, or if you can make it yourself. So basically you would have to be a tailor if you're going to do that. But the fact that she doesn't even tell you how to make the robe is a problem. So you can't even bring the components you need to somebody because you have no idea what you need. It's not even listed as to what items actually make that robe up. So what happens here is, in this particular class quest at the beginning, she wants you to bring robes to her that you can only get if somebody is a tailor, number one, and number two, somebody has the quest. So basically it's a class-specific quest, and people argue with me about this all the time. Yes, you can make the robe without the quest. That's not what this is. It's a class-specific quest that a warlock cannot do unless they have that robe. Therefore, a warlock that is not only a tailor, but also a warlock in conjunction with each other is very rare, because warlocks are almost never tailors. You can be one, but it's usually reserved for mages and stuff like that. That's the commonplace with this. The issue here is that there's nothing in the quest text that allows the warlock's particular class quest at the beginning to get that robe outside of bringing the ingredients, which you have no idea what they are, to a tailor, or being a tailor yourself, or buying it off of the auction house. Face it, if tailors never made that, you would never be able to get it done. You would literally you yourself would have to become a tailor to do it, which defeats the purpose on why should I have to become a tailor if I'm doing other professions, because you can only have two professions in this game. So let me elaborate on the actual what should have been done here. So with this particular situation, it requires an actual robe. Now, the quest giver should have additional things in there as part of the quest, where she tells you, okay, if you're a tailor, make it yourself. If you could buy it, go buy one, whatever. So either find a tailor, be a tailor yourself, or buy it. But that should further be extended to say, if you aren't a tailor or don't know somebody or can't buy one, go get these materials, bring them to me, and I'll make it for you. So they didn't even allow the warlock the ability to go out and get the items in the off chance that somebody didn't make it and or you're not a tailor. So it's bad programming. And so I understand the need for doing the quest that way because it relies on other people. But you're talking about a class-specific quest where that restriction should not apply. Because a class-specific quest you should be able to get done regardless if you can rely on somebody else or not. There should be multiple ways to do it. So it's bad programming to do very specific class quests to rely on somebody else. It just defeats the purpose of the class quest. If you can't do a class quest completely on your own, technically you can if you're a tailor, but that's not the point. You shouldn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to be that way. It should, again, allow you to bring the materials to the person in case you aren't a tailor or you can't find somebody that you can't buy it. Because, again, if somebody never made it, if you weren't a tailor, you would never be able to get that done. And if you're doing other professions, you're not going to become a tailor. You're not going to sacrifice your other professions just to get by this quest. It's something that's just ludicrously put together and shouldn't be that way. So I just wanted to end this video with me fishing, and let's see if I can actually catch something here. Again, I've only caught one fish out of over 200 casts. It's ridiculous. So let's see here. Gotta wait. Let's see here. Okay, that's what keeps happening. So let me try one more time. I swear it's ridiculous. There's no reason for me to have to do this 200 times. That's ridiculous. There's no reason for that. So I'm going to end this, and I will talk to you guys later. Say this is TL Gamer signing off. Have a good day or night wherever you guys are.